If I ever find someone who is looking for some fantasy, these are my go-to recommendations. If you have read some of them, you're gonna find something else here for you. If you have read none of them, I want your brain, give it to me. And if you have read these books, we're gonna be best buds. The key with all of these though is that they are 100% finished. There are lots of other series that I love to recommend to people because they are that good. But the last thing I wanna do is ruin their lives. So this list only contains my recommendations for fantasy series that are actually complete. I'm here to make friends, not enemies. This isn't necessarily a list of my top series either. It's just a bunch of ones that I love recommending to people because I think that they are quite hard not to enjoy. The first series on this list is a flintlock epic fantasy that gives off those French Revolution vibes. It is set in the kingdom of Adro at the end of an absolutely big old political upheaval. It has a magic system that has always excited me and revolves around the mages snorting gunpowder to help them manipulate bullets and powder itself. It's also beautifully contrasted with a much softer magic system of call fire and burn things. And it is the Powder Mage trilogy by Brian McClellan. The first book in the series, The Promise of Blood, followed by the Autumn Republic and the Crimson Campaign, concludes the series. It is one of my favorites, got a couple of my favorite characters ever in it. And if you find yourself vibing with the Powder Mage, there is a whole nother trilogy that follows on after the series. So you'll find yourself with another great trilogy that you can sink your teeth into as well. The next series dives into the world of assassins and takes place in a dark, gritty, brutal world filled with corruption and political intrigue. The story takes place in the city of Scenaria and its surrounding areas. The series follows the street urchin guild rat named Azoth and his journey into the magical world of assassins, and it has one of my favorite tropes in all of epic fantasy in that of the master and apprentice. I don't know if there are many series that revolve around assassins that doesn't have this trope. If there is, let me know because I'd love to read it. It also has one of my favorite characters of all time in Durzo Blint. The Night Angel series by Brent Weeks is definitely one that you should check out. I know that a fourth book has just been released, but you can read the original trilogy on its own. It does have a conclusion and it is finished. The fourth book is a continuation of that series, which I have not read yet. I'm always a sucker for an assassin story. If it's got it in it, I'm going to try it, especially if there's something to do with a mentor and someone who is going to take them on their journey. This is definitely one that you should check out. Okay, so the next series is sometimes really hard for me to recommend because I am still so unsure about the ending. But I do love recommending it because I think the whole series is fantastic and it also gives me people to discuss that ending with to help convince me of how I feel. The series has probably one of my favorite magic systems in all of epic fantasy. It is so creative and so in-depth, and the way that it has actual real consequences and impacts on the world around it is to me what makes a magic system so good. It is also by Brent Weeks and it is the Lightbringer series, which has a total of 5 books. So it's big. It begins with the Black Prism and follows the story of Kip and the Giles. I love this series so much. Watching the arcs of Kip and Karis and the Giles brings me so much joy. That and the relationship that Kip has with the Mighty and Croxa is just so good. If for nothing else, read this series for the magic system alone. It is so creative and so fun. It revolves around taking in light from across the spectrum and drafting it in different forms of physical luxen. Each color on the spectrum has a different manifestation and a different way that it forms and a different way that the drafters use the magic. I love how Weeks uses it to create very complex problems and really cool solutions for the characters to undertake, while also keeping it really grounded in a really cool consequence system. The series is huge. It is over 4,000 words long, and for 3,900 of those words, it is absolutely one of my favorite series I have ever read. I am just so unsure about the ending. Now that might be off-putting for some people, but I definitely think it is worth reading for sure. At the very least, it's finished, so you get some closure. The next series is Mammoth, and I have not even come close to reading all of them. But I think that is what gives this series its appeal. Terry Pratchett's Discworld definitely has something for everyone, but the key is to not get overwhelmed. Pretty much all of the books can be read as standalones, but if you find yourself vibing with some of the characters, there are some series that are kind of nested in throughout. They don't even follow sequentially. They're kind of thrown all about these 41 different volumes. And I highly recommend just giving it a go and seeing if this absurd fantasy series is something that you are into. If you want to give Discworld a go, I've got 3 starting points for you that all offer something a little bit different. The first one is Small Gods, which is probably the funniest book I've ever read, and no other book that I have read has made me laugh like this one did. It follows the god Om and his prophet brother, and is a commentary on what religion is and how its followers sometimes blindly follow rules that they may have interpreted in their own way, which is not necessarily what the gods had in planned. Guards is another one that is part of the City Watch series and has probably one of my favorite prologues of any book ever. At the very least, just read that and it will probably make you want to read the rest of it, because it is so clever how it twists tropes, which is what I think is one of Terry Pratchett's biggest strengths. And the last one is More, which follows a young boy's journey with one of the greatest characters ever created in death. Any of these are great starting points, and I highly recommend just don't overthink it. Pick one of those 3 up and just dive in and see if it is for you. The next series has what I would say is the most universally loved magic system in all of fantasy, and for no other reason you should drop everything right now and go pick it up if you have not read it yet. Otherwise, if you have read it, we must be best buds. The Mistborn trilogy by Sandon Branderson is the first place that I recommend to people who want to get into the genre, or if I want to make a new friend. If you have not heard of this series and the crazy shit that Sanderson has been doing over the last couple of years, particularly this year, then you need to remove yourself from the rock that you are under. But if by some divine act you have not heard of this series, I'll be very, very brief. Mistborn is an expertly crafted world and an incredible magic system that sits inside of the wider universe of the Cosmere. The first trilogy, which is the first era of Mistborn, is probably my favorite series, or one of my favorite series, as it is for so many other people. It is followed up by a second era that has 4 books in it that is pretty good as well. It is just very, very hard to top what Sanderson did in this first trilogy. The magic system itself is so damn good. You will find yourself scraping metal shavings and eating them just to see if you can push metal around the room. Sanderson describes the series himself as Ocean's 11, but all of the team members have magical powers that they need to use to execute this heist. That, crossed with the awesome question of what happens if the Dark Lord actually won, just makes for such a tasty recipe. So if you haven't read it, go and do it. The next series has probably some of the best combat and action you are going to get in any of these books. Closely followed by some of the best characters put on paper, but it does have some problems with it that stops me from recommending it to people too early on in their journey through fantasy. The First Law trilogy by Joe Abercrombie is a grimdark series that follows the interweaving lives of a bunch of different characters, beginning with the first book in The Blade itself. It is grimdark, so be prepared for some very dark characters, some very questionable choices, not a whole lot of morality, and violence, like a whole lot of violence. From one individual in particular in one of my personal favorites of Logan Ninefingers, or as he is known when he slips into a bit of a rage, the Bloody Nine. Along with him is Glokta, who I think is pretty much universally loved by everybody that has read these books. He will become one of your favorite characters, which is what Abercrombie's greatest strength is. He creates borderline perfect characters. That and how visceral and awesome the action is, especially when he does his little POV change in the middle of combat, is just very, very good. But the one hang up that I do have is the plot. It takes its time. The first book feels like it almost doesn't have any. It is a whole lot of setup. And don't get me wrong, it sets up what is a brilliant series as a whole. And if you can get past it, which you will, you're in luck, because Abercrombie has a whole bunch of standalones that follow different characters and different storylines after the First Law, and then he has another series, another trilogy that comes after that, that is equally as good, that you can dive into. So if you start with this one, you end up with like 10 books that you can dive into, and you're gonna love every single one of them. So get on it. The next series was my first venture into urban fantasy, and it was a little bit jarring the first time that there were ceiling fans and cars rolling around. But if you're in the market for some urban fantasy, I think this is a very good place to start, because it's got gangsters that do kung fu and magic. What more could you want? The Greenbone Saga, beginning with Jade City by Fonda Lee, is set in a time just after a whole bunch of political political war and battle, and it follows this core family very closely as they struggle with this control, and you are left in love and breathless and just so attached to each one of those people in that family. There is heavy politics in this series, but it is very refreshing and different from what you typically get with most fantasy. Jade City is very gritty, very dirty, and very underground. But one of my favorite things about this series is how integral honor, tradition, and respect are to this story, and how it is seamlessly weaved throughout all of it. Jade is the most powerful currency on the market. It is the backbone of the magic system, and it is what gives the Jade Warriors the power to enhance their abilities. But you've got to earn your Jade honorably, which has led to a whole bunch of underground Jade trade, a black market, and a whole lot of shady shit. It is fantastic, and the series itself holds one of my favorite moments that comes late in the third book that is so powerful because of the way that Fonda Lee sets up and executes the magic system and the real consequences that the characters have. It is just awesome, and I do highly recommend this series. The final series on this list is probably my favorite series out of all of them. The other ones are kind of fluid and they bounce around and go from the top to the bottom, but this one always seems to find its way back to the top. All of these series have, at the end of the day, the same strength, and that is characters and relationships, period. You will find these two things at the heart of every single great story ever created. But there is something special about a bromance, and that is what makes this series so special to me. It is the magic, it is the world building, it is how satisfying and how neat the conclusion of this series is. And all of those things contribute to why I love this series so much, but nothing comes close to the relationship between Royce and Hadrian. Reread Revelations is 3 books by Michael Sullivan that follows these two characters. Royce is an untrusting, mean asshole of an assassin, and his best mate is Hadrian, who is too trusting, the most charismatic guy you will ever meet, and he carries around a big ass sword on his back. What more could you want? But it is their dynamic and their banter that I love so much. But more than that, it's the real history that they have. Michael Sullivan does such a good job of showing you that these two characters didn't start their relationship on page 1. They have a real history that has led to where they are now, and the relationship that they have with each other, but also all of the side characters as well. It just makes you want more and more and more from this series. And you're lucky, because that is exactly what you get. While this is a 3-book trilogy, there are 4 prequels that are out that take place obviously before the events of that trilogy that interweave all the characters and all of the little plot lines. I really, really enjoy that Sullivan hints at things that happened in the past, and then he gives you the prequel to tell you that story. Now, I don't necessarily think that prequels are the best because you kind of already know what happens. But because the strength of this series is character based, all you want to do is spend more time with them. So when you get to dig deeper into those stories that are hinted at in the main trilogy, it is just so much fun. So please go check out this series if you do nothing else, but check them all out. They are all awesome, and then we can be best buds. Let me know what your favorite series is to recommend to anyone. If anyone asks, what's your favorite series? What do you tell them? What's the first one that pops into your mind? But until then, take care, and I'll catch you in the next one.